Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Justine Warner. Hi Justine.
Hi Sue.
It's brilliant speaking to you today, and Justine's quite a local girl, another Yorkshire stitcher, and actually we've just been chatting because our stomping grounds are quite similar over the years, although we don't actually know each other. We've never met, but I think we've trodden in the same places, haven't we, Justine?
Definitely.
Yeah. Right, I have Justine's bio here for you. I am a mixed media artist based in North Yorkshire near to the Howardian Hills. I work predominantly in textiles and found objects, but enjoy experimenting with a range of mixed media. My work is influenced by my local environment and the nature that surrounds us. This often includes the Yorkshire coast, moors, wolds and dales. My work is often mistaken for paintings, but look closely and you will discover my main canvas is vintage ties. Yeah, we will be asking them questions about that. I went to art college and then trained in interior design, and I've spent my career as a secondary school teacher delivering product design, textiles and food technology. Pearl Loves Paisley is the next adventure in my life, and I've been working on exhibiting my art and delivering both day and residential courses in a range of experimental textile techniques. I work from my home in Sheriff Hutton and have a small studio in the house. Building work is due to start mid-2020 with a new studio in the garden. This is an exciting time and an opportunity I feel will only enhance my work in time. So there we are. That's Justine. Justine's links and pictures of her lovely work with the ties is all on her episode of Stitchery Stories on stitcherystories.com. And of course, do go and follow Justine. She's on Facebook and Instagram. As I say, all her links are on her episode. Right, that's all the admin dealt with. So welcome again, Justine. And we were just having a laugh, weren't we? Because it's taken us a while to get ourselves organised and find a slot. So I'm like really chuffed, as we say in Yorkshire, to be speaking to Justine at long last. As we get started, Justine, do you want to share with us what you are working on and what's got you excited?
As usual, I'm working on several things at once. I never tend to stick with just one thing. I've just had a Meet the Artist event at Nunnington Galleries in the Howardian Hills. And I had a lot of work to get framed for that. So I did a lot of exhibition pieces working with my ties and textiles. Yeah. So that's gone now. So I'm really focusing, and I've been playing in the last few weeks with mixed media. So I'm working on paper, cards. I'm working on different bits and pieces where I'm looking at collage work, and then I'm going to sew into that. Oh, right. So I'm looking at backgrounds. I'm also working at the moment, bought some antique photographic plates, and I'm sanding those down. I'm actually going to sew into those or to weave into those as well. So lots going on, and I'm prepping for an exhibition at the Salt Gallery at the moment, which is in Beverley. So it's just really getting to those deadlines, but I'm enjoying the process with the textiles work.
Yeah. Photographic plates, I thought they were glass.
No, photographic plates, they're antique ones, so they're pine, so they're wood, and then they've got either glass or perspex at the front. So what I'm trying to do is to sand them down and to use them as frames, but I might weave into some of them, or I might have some textiles work coming out of those. So I'm using the frames themselves as frames for my work.
Right. I had envisions there, if you're trying to stitch it into glass, I'm thinking, how on earth is that going to work?
It's probably one of the only things I've not tried stitching into, to be honest. Most recently I've been stitching into metals and things like that. So so I haven't quite stitched into glass yet, but never say never.
Brilliant. Right, that's a lot of things going on. And due to everything being chaotic this year, for various reasons, did you actually get on with your studio in the garden? Has that started, or has that been put off with everything?
It's been put off for a little while, yeah. So it is due to start in 6 weeks.
Right. Good.
But it was due to start when we were in lockdown.
Yeah.
So I think getting hold of building materials would have been quite difficult.
It's not
So
been a nightmare.
the end is there. I can see it in my sights. I can just about touch it, but it's not quite started yet. But when it does, I'll have a lovely studio in the back. It's some old stables which I'm renovating. So it'll be quite a nice size to work in for me. And I need a bit more space because at the moment I'm in the third bedroom, as many people will
Yes.
probably know what I'm talking about. But things are getting taller and taller and higher, and I'm getting less and less space to work. So I need a bit more of that space for freedom, really.
Oh, that will be exciting though, won't it? Yeah, I was just wondering. I thought, I wonder if that actually happened because of lockdown. But if it's scheduled and it's nearly ready to happen now, that's exciting anyway, isn't it? So,
I hope so. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
I bet you are. Lots of people have got the dream of having their studio in the garden, haven't they? So I hope you'll be posting lots of photos for us all to have a look and envy.
I don't think you'll be able to stop me posting photographs, to be honest. It'll be that exciting. So I might even put a blog on my website just to show the progress of the studio as it's going on.
Yeah, people are always interested in that kind of thing because we're all basically nosy, aren't we?
We are.
Or is it just me?
No, we are.
Right, fabulous. Now, let's talk about the ties. So I'm quite fascinated by this. And to say, everyone, if you go and look at some of Justine's pictures at first, you need to go look at them because otherwise you'll think we've just completely bonkers by talking about putting ties in work. So do you want to tell me a bit about how all that started, Justine? Because I do find it quite fascinating.
Yeah, it's like all these things. It was a very happy accident because I just moved to Sheriff Hutton from the centre of York, and I just moved to the countryside, and it was a couple of weeks before the village show started, and I just wanted to kind of try and fit in with the village. So I frantically looked for any textiles that I could use to make a cushion cover. That was one of the categories. And I found a bag of ties, and that was about it. I had access to my sewing machine, that was unpacked, and this bag of ties, and I thought, how am I going to make a cushion cover out of that? So I just laid down these ties, and it was almost instant that I was really inspired by how I'd laid them out. To me, they just already said landscapes. Right. So I made the cushion cover. I won best in show. I got my name engraved on a plaque, which probably didn't go down that well, being only in the village for about a minute.
But, a newcomer. I know what Yorkshire villages are like, crikey.
And I think they've forgiven me though, so I think that's all right. So it started off like that, and it's just the richness of it, and just the local landscape of the Howardian Hills is absolutely beautiful, and it's very linear to me. So I just started doing a couple of pictures out of ties and just for my own pleasure, really. And then I got into sewing little trees on, and it just escalated there. And I had a lot of people that really encouraged me and supported me. And one thing led to another, and I got a market stall at Hovingham Market. I was invited to do sort of joint exhibitions with people. And just those ties that have been laid together into a landscape just led me down a much more creative path, and just a kind of a commercial path, really, which was lovely, but it all happened very quickly. In terms of what I do with the ties and how that has changed, my work from the start was basically 3 ties sewn together and a tree on it, and that's how it started. But right. I think my work has got a lot more painterly. And I've said on my website, on my bio, that it's people often mistake them for paintings, and it's where I try to blend the patterns and the textures and the richness that you get on the ties, and I try to blend those together. So really, I'm using scraps of fabric, scraps of thread, and I'm doing what a painter would do, and I'm kind of moving the colours and the texture around on those ties themselves before I start to put the detail on.
Right, because it is quite fascinating where I guess you would look at a tie and it's like really stripy, and you think, what on earth? But then when you look at a forest and it's sunny, you've got a stripy floor, haven't you, from the shadows of the trees and things. So although it starts off sounding kind of a bit mad, really, by the time you've finished, I mean that in a nice way, but by the time you've finished, I find it very fascinating to, as you say, to look closely at your images. And then you think, oh, look, there's that tie had like squiggly bits on it. Who'd have thought it would fit in with that field? Or, you know, and I really like that I Spy side of things. Just spotting
There's
those
still
patterns.
people who will come to an exhibition, and then when I meet them, I could have a 10-minute conversation with them, and at the end of the conversation, I'll say, "But you do know they're made of textiles." And firstly, they are surprised that they're made of textiles, and when I get that blank look on their faces, I'll say, "And they're made of men's ties." And they do look at me gone out. And I actively encourage people to go right up to them, because it's not obvious.
No.
And by the layering technique, some of them are lost. And what I do is when I've layered, so there might be 3 or 4 layers on top of the ties, but then I get a heat gun and I burn it right back to the tie. So there's only little bits, little hints coming out, but that texture, if I remove that from my pictures and it was a plain canvas, my pictures wouldn't have that richness and that depth of colour and texture. So it's really important, even though it is just a sneak of a pattern or a sneak of a colour, it is really important in my work that it is coming through from the back.
Yeah, and so where do you get all these ties then? Is it everyone goes, oh, look, we've got all these old manky ties. Let's give them to Justine. Do you get bags of ties left on your doorstep, or do you go hunting around charity shops?
Exactly that. I'll open my front door and there will be a bag of ties on the doorstep. It's amazing. So I do meet a lot of people along the way with market stalls and exhibitions that I might do. Yeah. And when I explain to people, it is that thing. It's like, oh, I've got a bag of ties at home. We don't know what to do with them. And I'll open my door, and quite often there's not a note. I have no idea who they've come from. But there's some amazing ones. And I do have an amazing relationship with the Sheriff Hutton Jumblies.
Do they still have a jumble in Sheriff Hutton?
They do, and they're amazing. They raise about £20,000 a year for local charities, which is outstanding. But we have come to an agreement. So if there's anything there which they think I'm going to find useful, then they help me out a little bit, and I support their charities. But I do, from some people, I'll get some Mickey Mouse ties, which obviously don't look good in a landscape, or I get some real humdinger of patterns from the 1970s. And I do actually have a rack which I keep in a box, which is just interesting ties. So I'll never do anything with them, but they are just beautiful. So there's some that I just keep and look at, really. One day I might sew those together as well and make something. But I don't waste anything. So even the little tags that you get on the back of the ties, I'm keeping those in a box. So all the ones that I've been using.
No wonder you've run out of space.
Definitely. So and I'll just sew those together, because some of the labels and some of the 1960s fonts that you get on those labels are interesting in themselves. That is an ongoing project that I've got, but it's not started yet, but it's in the planning, shall we say.
Yeah. Oh, well, lots to be excited and interested about there. So that's really fascinating. Thank you for kind of explaining a bit about what you do with these men's ties, because that really is quite it's quite interesting on there. Right. So obviously you've gone through your art college training and you've done your teaching. So what was it that's really kind of set you off on on your journey through embroidery and textile art, and then kind of developing your own brand? Well, sideline's the wrong kind of word to say, but what set you off on those paths, Justine?
As I said, it's mainly due to the encouragement that I've got from local artists and local people that have helped me and supported. But definitely my background of interior design and colourways and the sculpture that I used to do at art college has definitely helped. When the GCSE, because GCSE textiles as it used to stand doesn't really exist anymore in schools, but they kind of linked to product design, which was one of my main subjects that I taught. And they started to look at experimental textiles at GCSE. So things like electronic textiles,
Oh,
e-textiles,
yeah.
printing onto fabrics which can be heat treated. So that kind of started my interest, and I did a couple of courses myself, which inspired me. And then it kind of coincided with a local artist at a local gallery here offering me the opportunity to do some classes.
Right.
And as I was doing those classes, I was obviously learning a lot about experimental textiles. So things like Tyvek and Lutrador, painting onto Bondaweb, that kind of thing. But just more of my courses, the people that come on my course explain them as a bit of a play.
Yeah.
And I think the more I played, the more addictive the whole thing became.
Right.
So even though I kept with the ties, I was actually using some of those more experimental techniques and materials with those as well.
Right.
So it kind of, that success in my work was what really spurred me on. And then I started being offered solo exhibitions, and the Yorkshire Arboretum, which is near Castle Howard, offered me a solo exhibition, and that's kind of where people really became very interested in my work. So I did a year's residency at the Yorkshire Arboretum, which gave me basically the key to the Arboretum. It was lovely.
Yeah.
So that I found incredibly inspirational, being able to be in the Arboretum on a snowy day just with my dogs.
Just you
know. Yeah, it was just, and that was a real treat. It was a real pleasure. And I think the success from that exhibition in itself was what led me further down the path of exhibiting my work.
Right, because you seem to, it sounds like a generalisation. I seem to spot you at Nunnington Hall a lot.
Yes, well, I was at Nunnington Hall. I mean, I would say that's my biggest, the thing that I'm the proudest of what I've achieved.
Right.
But I did a joint exhibition at Nunnington Hall with a painter and printmaker called Patrick Smith, which was, I think it was last year. And to work for the National Trust and go from somebody that had market stalls and sewed a few ties together to the upstairs at a National Trust property and selling work there and having people interested in what I do was just amazing, because that all happened within the space of 3 years.
Right. Fabulous.
So everything's gone very quickly for me. But yeah, the links to Nunnington Hall, and hopefully when things start to blow over a little bit, we've been in discussions with another exhibition at the hall, which would be lovely. But just Nunnington in itself, because I'm represented by Nunnington Galleries,
right,
which is a gallery which is just up from the hall.
Right.
And so it might be that you've seen links to Nunnington
Galleries, right?
Yeah. So I'm still represented by Nunnington Galleries, as are about 4 or 5 other painters and jewellery makers, which is lovely. So it's a nice place to share that space with, really.
Yeah.
But it did start off at Nunnington Hall.
Right. Okay. It was the Nunnington Hall, and then you just keep seeing the Nunnington bit, and I wasn't quite sure whether it was part of Nunnington Hall, because I couldn't remember. It's brilliant.
I mean, Nunnington's a really interesting place at the moment, because they've got the hall, they've got the gallery, and they've also got some studios at Nunnington, so it's a really nice place to visit. And there's a lot going on, and it's a very pretty village. It's lovely.
Yes, yeah, it is. As you said in your opening there, it's easy to be inspired by the Yorkshire countryside and the coast, the Wolds, where I obviously went to school in Pocklington. It's the middle of the Yorkshire Wolds. Hockney's been greatly inspired by around there. And there's just so much to look at, and we're just greatly blessed.
Knowing where to start with Yorkshire, really.
It is. It really is, because it's so different as well.
Yeah, as you stated at the start, we've got the same stomping ground, so Hornsey and Pocklington and the Wolds and Driffield, and to me, I guess that's kind of how my work has become so linear, because of the rolling hills and the big skies.
Linear and skies, isn't it?
The Dales, I'm inspired by the moors, and even the going over to the coast. I've done several pictures recently of Sands End and Boggle Hole, but it's where to start. And to be honest, I find it very difficult sometimes to keep up with my inspiration, because even my drive to work, which is past Castle Howard, there's just so many times I stop and take photographs because it's just so inspirational. So it's even hard for me to get beyond 10 miles.
It's hard to even get to work without stopping.
It just takes a long time to go anywhere, that's all.
Brilliant. And what I will say to everybody, because I know we have global listeners, I will include some links on Justine's episode of, there are some beautiful sites with like just basically photographs of Yorkshire. There's some stunning ones. So I'll include those so you can actually see some of the places that we are talking about.
It's a very beautiful part of the world.
Right. Anyway, so before we bore everybody with our wittering on about Yorkshire,
with Yorkshire.
let's pull ourselves away from Yorkshire and look at something else. So I think we've worked out that you're inspired by Yorkshire and the countryside. Right, techniques. So we did talk there about the layering. Do you just use mostly machine embroidery, or do you put hand stitching in there as well? What sort of, do you have any kind of particular favourite thing that you like to do with the ties and the layers?
Yeah, it's hard to know where to start in terms of techniques, because they're all my favourite techniques. They all lend themselves. But I would guess so. I do a lot of straight stitching to begin with. So I anchor down all the ties. I don't disassemble them. And then after that straight stitch, I will then do free machine embroidery on top of that.
Hang on, I'm going to stop you there. Right, so you just use them as they are folded up. Yes. As a tie, as an absolute tie. That is how they go on. You don't cut them up or anything like that. No. Right.
And it makes a difference because it gets thicker and it starts to quilt the work a little bit. So I have blown up one of the motherboards on my sewing machine. So it does struggle sometimes because they are so thick. But to me, again, that does matter.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of quilting it as well. It's giving it that thickness, richness and that softness.
Yeah.
So no, I don't take them apart at all.
Right, carry on.
Yeah, no, it does restrict my works sometimes. So occasionally, if it needs be, I'll disassemble one, but not very often at all.
Yeah.
And then so I then free machine embroider on top of that. And then I burn back, and then I start to add more layers to it and then keep burning back. So it may be that I start off with, a couple of layers and I might not like something. So textiles is quite forgiving because you can patch back up and go over with other threads. When I've finished and I've got the general layout and general detail on my work, occasionally I will hand sew.
Right.
I do use seed beads quite a bit just to give that little bit of a texture in the foreground. But I've got a love-hate relationship with seed beads.
I think we all do.
Yeah, I get very, very carried away with them, and I can lose hours of my life sewing them. But at the beginning of that session, I'm just filled full of dread because I just know how long it takes. But you soon start to get into it, and I do, as I say, lose hours of my life with seed beading. Sometimes if there's a little bit of detail, I will hand sew onto that as well.
So predominantly then machine, and then all the other techniques, as you say, like the burning back and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So does it make a difference with, a lot of ties are silk, some are like kind of polyestery kind of things? Is there a certain type of tie that you eyes light up when you see them in the bag?
Not the Mickey Mouse ones. It doesn't matter what fabric they are. Obviously, silk ties in themselves are absolutely beautiful, but I've got I think, and this is where the name also relates to it, I've got a fondness for 1960s Paisley ties.
I wondered if that's where Paisley was coming from. And who's Pearl?
Well, it's when I first started off, I used, and I still do use, recycled jewellery. So I'll cut up all bits of jewellery which I might find, and obviously that's where the pearls came in, and the Paisley is related.
Right.
But since then, I have got a dog, which is a cream dog, which we call Pearl, and she gave birth to a lovely, lovely little naughty dog, and that one's now called Paisley. So I do have a dog called Pearl and a dog called Paisley. But that's where the name came from, is that it's the Paisley, the rich reds and the golds of those 1960s Paisleys are lovely in my work. But it doesn't matter to me in my pictures.
Right.
what fabrics they are. What does happen though, if I use a silk one next to a polyester one, the work can start to buckle a little bit, so it can start to twist, which causes its own problems, especially when it goes to the framer, because I need to lace it back. It can sort of bulge out in places, especially the really big ones that I do. I do some which are about 1 metre wide.
Oh, right. So that's large then. That was my other question was going to be the size and scale that you work at.
Yeah, I tend to use about 0.5 metre by 0.5 metre. And the reason for that is, one, my framer understands my work at that size, but it's to be able to physically get it through a sewing machine.
Yes.
So they're usually like letterbox scale. So they're usually long and thin, because obviously you've got the arm of the sewing machine, and to get that through, quite a physical thing to do when it's 1 metre long. So I could be working on a sky and just sewing backwards and forwards for a day, just anchoring it down, because it's just such a long piece of work to work with. But it does, the longer ones, the bigger ones can start to buckle quite badly. So I've done one recently which was of Thixondale, and that was quite a big one, and I had to, it bulged in the middle so much that I had to cut it and sort of slice it over. But it happened in the most perfect place. It happened where there was going to be a join anyway, so you can't really notice, but it was obvious as I was working through that piece that it was going to be a bit problematic. It took me a very long time to do that one.
So that is working at quite a large scale then, as you say, in terms of the composition, but the actual physical amount of work involved in treating and adding your processes and techniques onto those base fabrics at that size. So hats off to you for persevering.
I would struggle to do anything bigger, to be honest. It's just that there is a restriction with a sewing machine unless I decided to piece them together.
Right. And then you've still got a problem anyway, haven't you, with just the sheer size of them. So
they're heavy, because they're so thick as well. And thick, and if they're big, then they become quite heavy to work with.
All these practicalities that are learnt by trial and error, no doubt.
And that is it. It is trial and error.
And we talked there about high points and being involved over at Nunnington. Is there anything else that really kind of stands out for you as you've made this, as you said yourself, quite a rapid journey really, from first trying this and to where you are now?
I would say that the Arboretum and Nunnington Hall must be my highlights. But then there's little things as well as you go along, and there's somebody being so excited about your work and really wanting to buy it. But not just in a I'm going to buy it kind of way, just that it means something or so much to people when they're looking at textiles work. And I do commissions as well, and there's people that have given me ties which mean something to them.
Oh, right, like the granddad's ties or that kind of thing. And
like a photograph of a view, and then I've produced a piece of work, and just to me it's that means so much more to me, just how much that means to that person than any exhibition really. So it's the smaller things, and obviously when you've got an issue that you need to overcome, and you work on it and you solve that problem. So it's those little things that keep you going and mean a lot to me.
I think that's really nice, so that you can create that very personal dimension for somebody, as you say, a personal view with some ties from the person who they liked being there or what reminded them of it. So that's a really precious dimension, that, and I mean that in a nice way, to somebody, as you say, you've evoked those emotions, and really that's what art and creativity is all about, really, isn't it? It's our emotions and our emotional response to those pieces of work.
But that's that extra, it gives it that extra dimension. So it's not just that somebody loves looking at the work. It means that it kind of evokes an emotion which is very personal. That is an honour to do that.
Isn't it, as you say, it's an honour to be able to create that work and have those responses to it. That's lovely, is that? Now, we usually then kind of trundle on to any possible disasters. So, as we said, with these things, are learning curves, aren't there? So, have you got any funny stories for us, Justine, of when something didn't quite go right? You possibly called it a disaster, and really, what did you learn from that?
I think this is a really difficult question for me to answer. I don't think I have any funny stories. I do have a box and a bag and a folder. I have all sorts of things around me of things which maybe didn't quite work. But what I tend to do, I would never call any of them a disaster, because if I have a piece of work, for example, at the Arboretum, I could not get a reflection in the lake in this piece. It looked awful. But then I just then cut it up, and things which people would normally call disasters, I just work with and transform them into something else. So there's not doesn't seem to be much that's kind of wasted on my behalf. It's just, it turns into something else. It evolves into something else.
And that's a lovely thing about textiles, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, you can have something which, like a lake in the middle of the Yorkshire Arboretum, and then you can cut it up and then free machine embroider onto something, and it didn't look anything like it did in the first place. And as I mentioned before, textiles is so forgiving that you can put another bit of textiles over it and completely change it. So no real disasters. Painting, I think all my paintings quite often turn out as disasters, because I feel like I can paint with thread and textiles, but I would like to be able to paint with acrylics or watercolours, and I just find that so difficult. And I've just recently done a Zoom watercolour class. I enjoy the process. I absolutely love it, but it's just the outcome of them sometimes I'm a little bit frustrated by. And no doubt I'll probably just tear them up and put them into a collage and sew into them. So I wouldn't say disasters. I think just, if you're not too precious about your work in the first place, it's not going to be a disaster. I have burnt through.
I was going to say, you burn things, don't you? There's bound to be if not fire.
Not on fire exactly, but I have burnt through things quite a bit. So I did a woodlands, as a lot of my work is woodlands, and I used Cunin felt for some of the trees, and I burnt through so much that it went right back to the ties. But in the end, I sort of sat back and I thought, well, that looks like the dappled sunlight on the tree. So actually it worked okay. But some of because I'll get near to the end of the process before I start burning back sometimes. And that's a bit of a hair-raising thing to do right at the end. But nothing on fire as of yet.
Oh, well, there we are. Hooray. You don't want to be setting your stables on fire either, do you?
No, not at all.
The lovely new studio.
No.
So usually what goes hand in hand is somebody who reuses everything that they've made often doesn't have any dreaded unfinished objects. So do you have any unfinished objects, or do you just, again, cut them up and they appear in something else at a later date?
It's usually cutting them up and they appear in something else at a later date. I have a lot of unfinished painted work, which I will go into at some stage. I did set up in the village a knit and natter group at the pub. So I could have my gin and tonic whilst I was knitting. But I realised I'd set it up and I was the only person that couldn't knit in the group. So they taught me how to knit, and I'm halfway through a very beige scarf. And it's obviously not my thing. And just in the winter, I was determined to get this scarf done and just keep going with it. But I was distracted by shiny things, really. And it's just sat in a bag downstairs next to where I sit on the sofa. It's not doing anything. So maybe it's going to be a winter project, but I'm not quite sure that knitting is for me, really. But I might just cut it up and sew it into something.
Because it'd go nice in like a barley field or something, wouldn't it? That kind of colour.
Well, watch this space.
Watch this scarf, see what happens to it.
Watch this very small scarf.
Oh dear. As you've moved towards, you say you've been working towards exhibitions and you've had some residencies and, various things that you've got on the go. And you're still a teacher. So how do you manage all of that?
I think...
Or don't you want to answer?
No. I think because this is what I get asked a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm part-time at work.
Right.
At school. So I work 4 days a week in school,
Right.
which does only leave me 3 days to do this. But I tend to work really well under pressure. So if I know I've got an exhibition coming up, I can really focus, and I will literally sit in my studio for hours on end just working on things. So I know my key pieces. So I know what big pieces I need to do for exhibitions, but the other bits and pieces, they tend to be in the dead of night, really. Yeah. And school holidays, I work on this. So I've been very focused in that respect, because I'm really enjoying this aspect of my life. So I want to keep that momentum going, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult to do. But as I say, if I know I've got an exhibition coming up, I can really get my head down and work at it. And I think I've always been like that, even at uni, which a lot of people probably relate to. But I would do all-nighters at uni just to get interior design projects done, because I guess that's maybe how I work.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. You're enjoying doing it, and if we enjoy doing something, we will move heaven and earth to do the thing that we're enjoying. And I think if you're struggling to get stuff done or find time, yes, there could be other reasons, but quite often is it really something that you really, really want to do? So yeah, that's the key, isn't it? If we enjoy doing it that much,
it's kind of irrelevant for me that it is a business as well. It's an arts business. It doesn't really matter that it is, because if I didn't have that, I would be doing a hobby in my studio. So I'd still be doing it every night. So
yes, and that's a good attitude to have with it as well.
Yeah, it's just something I love, and there's not enough hours, only because I enjoy it so much that the hours go too quickly, because I just get lost in it, which is quite a meditative thing. Yeah, it's a very relaxing thing for me to do. So perhaps it complements the teaching.
Yes, I'm sure it absolutely does. And we've had plenty of guests who are either currently our teachers or have just relatively recently packed it in. So it does seem to be a common thread there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Justine, as we wrap up our time today, I know it's difficult planning for things at the moment, isn't it? But kind of what else are you looking forward to that you might want to share with us? I know you mentioned about exhibitions and so forth. So if you're just going to wrap up and summarise what it is that we can all be keeping our beady little eyes out for you as well.
Yeah, as I said, I've got a couple of exhibitions coming up, and I am represented by a couple of galleries.
Yeah.
But I'm in the throes at the moment of setting up Zoom classes, because things are the way they are at the moment. I usually do a class on every other Friday at a gallery for experimental textiles, and obviously all of my classes have stopped.
Yeah.
So I'm just I've taken this summer really just to update my website, but on there as well, just to set up some Zoom classes.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of looking forward to that, because the ones that I've done myself, I've really enjoyed.
Yes.
I don't know whether doing it on Zoom will add to it or take away from it, but I think it's something that a lot of us are going to have to try in the future. And so in terms of classes, and I may be able to run classes in the future from the new studios. And I'm very, very proactive with the open studios. So I know East Riding have one, but North Yorkshire Open Studios went online this year. We can only hope that those kinds of things come back again next year.
Yeah, because people enjoy that as well, don't they? Going around and having a good nosy and a tour around and things. They're always very popular, the open studios, wherever you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a fantastic sort of platform for people. I mean, this year was very nice for me, because I got to nosy in other people's homes because of the videos, which was lovely. But it's something which which I hope to see again in the future.
Yeah. So actually, lots of exciting things to look forward to. And just going to give myself a plug here. So lots of people are moving online and trying to run classes and so on Zoom. Just to let you all know, I do actually have an online course on how to safely and professionally create using Zoom to run classes. So that's something that if anybody's interested in that, then by all means get in touch. It's for the very good value price of £49. So anybody can have access to that on top of other online classes that I'm also running. So just so you all know, there's a way. Don't sit and struggle and wonder if anybody can help you. That's what I do to earn a living. So there we are. Get my own plug in and my own advert. Right. Okie dokie. Right, Justine, it's been absolutely brilliant speaking to you. Really, really enjoyed chatting about all the lovely places in Yorkshire and all the lovely things that you do with your ties and the general approach that you have for all of this. Has been really, really interesting. So I know everyone will be really thrilled to listen and join us on a journey around Yorkshire. And everybody just, follow Justine, go and follow her on Instagram and go and look at her website, and you'll find up to date, what she's doing and when we can all start to join in with this sort of thing again. So really lovely speaking to you today, Justine.
No, thank you. I'm sorry it's taken so long to get to this point.
But we've made it, and that's the main thing.
We have, and it's been very nice. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Justine. Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery Stories.